artificial intelligence chatbots are increasingly coming into the public eye. You can see a wide variety of articles, news reports on these AI chatbots. And I'm starting to see mention of AI chatbots across the alternative media. And I thought this might be a good time to talk about this, what they are, what they aren't, what they are useful for, why we need to be cautious about them, and what some people might be getting wrong about them, at least for the time being. Now, there's two in particular that I have experience using, that I do use now. One is Google's Gemini, the other is OpenAI's ChatGPT. And you could just go to that. I've already been asking it some questions in preparation for this. Let me just ask, what is Google's Gemini? Let's see what it says it is. Google's Gemini, which I'm a part of, is a family of large language models developed by Google AI, specifically DeepMind and Google Research. It serves as the successor potential application. So what does it do? Gemini has the potential for various applications across different industries, including generating creative text formats, translating languages, creating different kinds of content, answering your questions in an informative way, even if they are complex or unusual. That's what it is, and that's basically what ChatGPT is. There's a difference though. Google's Gemini can also generate images, and I'll get into that in just a moment. ChatGPT does not for the time being. Now, I've seen a lot of people, especially in the alternative media, very skeptical about these AI chatbots, and many are trying to claim that these are just propaganda tools. They're trying to reinforce or validate mainstream narratives. Now, I've done my own investigation, and I found that these are, for the time being, at the time of recording this, these are legitimate artificial intelligence tools that are extremely useful. The catch is, it is only going to give you what you put in. If you give it a question that is kind of leading or trying to tease out a specific response, it may actually give you that response. If you're asking it good, objective, balanced questions, it will give you good, objective, balanced answers. The problem is, it is not going to do your thinking for you. It is going to help you think in a more complete and balanced way, but it is not going to do your thinking for you. That said, there is a degree of bias. So asking it any question at all, I have a couple of examples. I have 5 examples that I want to go over. The first example is in regard to a certain health crisis that took place relatively recently. If you ask it a question about this, it will give you a very mainstream establishment answer. But it is basing it on what it calls scientific consensus and peer review. What if you ask it a question about scientific consensus and peer review? Let's just ask it a question. And this is why it's so important to know the right questions to ask to get good answers. Can scientific consensus and the peer review process be manipulated by special interests through lobbying, bribery, and through conflicts of interest arising from partnerships between private industry and institutions involved in scientific consensus and peer review? Now, I've already asked it this question. It doesn't ever give you the exact same answer twice, but it is fairly consistent in terms of the content, the idea behind the content. So yes, scientific consensus and the peer review process can be vulnerable to manipulation by special interests. Here's a breakdown of the potential vulnerabilities and safeguards. So it lists vulnerabilities and safeguards. lobbying, bribery, conflict of interest, even ghostwriting and selective reporting, which I didn't ask about, but it volunteered that on its own. Then it talks about safeguards, transparency, rigorous peer review, reproducibility, scientific integrity policies. It says, even with safeguards, it's important to critically evaluate scientific claims, especially those with potential conflicts of interest. Look for independent replications and consider the source of funding. Follow the money. Even with safeguards, flawed or manipulated research can slip through. Retractions occur when significant errors or biases are discovered after publication. Effective communication of scientific findings to the public is crucial to combat misinformation and promote a nuanced understanding of scientific consensus. Let's ask it about science communication. Couldn't scientific communication to the public be likewise manipulated by special interests? You are absolutely right. Scientific communication to the public can also be manipulated by special interests, just like the scientific process itself. Here are some ways this can happen. Okay, and it goes through all of the things that I myself have talked about in regards to this specific topic. Now, you see how important it is to ask it to give you both sides of any particular topic. If you just ask it something about the health crisis, which I can't even talk about, that's how highly controlled it is by special interests, that I can't even talk about it on say YouTube, for example. But if you were to ask about it, it would give you an answer very close to the general consensus produced by this type of manipulation. If you ask it to give both sides, or you start interrogating it regarding the basis of its conclusion, it will reveal just how flawed the whole process is, and it will give you all of this information that you will never hear mentioned in the Western media. Have you ever seen the BBC, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, any of the mainstream Western media platforms talk about any of this? The manipulation of scientific consensus, how peer review can be manipulated, how even science communication to the public can likewise be manipulated. You will never hear that mentioned anywhere. But for the time being, Google Gemini's AI chatbot, it will tell you about this if you are careful the way you ask your questions. Let's ask about another highly contentious issue. How about the conflict in Ukraine? Let me ask it to please produce an analysis of the current state of the conflict in Ukraine, including statements made by both Russian and Ukrainian sources. Talks about Bakhmut and Avdiivka. The southern front remains largely static. Analysts suggest a potential stalemate on the ground, with neither side able to achieve a decisive breakthrough. Talks about Russian statements, Ukrainian statements, Ukraine asking for more advanced weaponry, more ammunition, talking about the humanitarian crisis, international response, on and on. It's crucial to consider the source of information when evaluating conflict. Both Russian and Ukrainian sources may be biased in the reporting. So that's very balanced. It's not telling you just listen to Ukraine, which is what the Western media will actually tell you. Don't listen to Russian sources. Listen to Ukrainian sources. Listen to Western sources. They will tell you the truth. Well, Google's Gemini is telling you be skeptical of both. Okay, so I think you're starting to get the picture here. Let's do another example. So I've just shown you how if you ask the right questions, these AI chatbots will give you very balanced and I would say useful answers. If you're trying to draw up an outline of a particular topic and you want to make sure that you're covering all of the issues, you want to see the pros and cons, even if you have picked a side in any particular debate, you want to see a complete list of potential counter arguments so that you could prepare yourself, or you could ensure that you are prepared, that you are confident of your conclusions. This is going to allow you to do that. It's going to produce content that you might not think of yourself because you've already made up your own mind. But again, the question you ask is very important. What about more practical issues? Say you want to set up a foundation to make human healthcare more accessible, advance human healthcare using open source technology that is accessible to everybody, cutting out patents, cutting out profit, basically a purpose-driven foundation to advance human healthcare as a counterbalance to Western big pharma that controls and stifles human healthcare. So if you ask it, please provide an outline of how to create a foundation focused on open source research and development, advance human health care, making it more accessible and effective. I always say please, just in case AI takes over the world. You want them to remember you were one of the polite ones. It produces this very long list of aspects that you would need to address if you wanted to create a foundation. I don't think anyone thinks that making a foundation is an easy thing to do. And it gives you all of these steps, a very clear outline as a starting point. So again, it's not going to do your thinking for you. It's not going to create the foundation for you, but it's going to give you an outline, a complete outline with items listed that you might not even have considered if you just sat down with a blank piece of paper and started doing this yourself. If you were going to go to an internet search engine, you would have to track down all of these points yourself. You may get lucky and see a website explaining it step by step, but you might have to go around for an entire day even to find this list that was generated in just seconds. You could even ask it, for example, are there any existing examples of open source healthcare foundations? And it will give you a list, and then you can go look up those lists, or you can just ask it about any of the specific examples that it lists. Now, finally, I want to get into the images that Gemini can generate, and I'm going to use a practical example, but for a project that I'm already working on, that I've already done in the past. That's why I'm picking this example, because I already know how to do this. So I can look at what Google's Gemini tells me, and I can gauge how useful this answer would be to someone who does not know how to do this. So creating an aquaponics system at home that you can use to grow your own food. And it's a closed system, more or less, where you take care of fish. And the waste from the fish is transformed into nutrients for plants through a very specific type of naturally occurring bacteria. The plants clean the water and return it back to the fish. And of course, you have inputs such as food that you have to feed the fish, and you have to make sure that the plants have access to sunlight or artificial grow light. But it's a very good way to grow food on your own, even if you have not even a single square meter of farmlands. Let's ask it about, please create an outline of how to create a home-based aquaponics system to grow a percentage of your own food locally. Okay, so it's talking about how to design it, the different types of systems you can use, the different types of hydroponic and aquaculture systems, the different kind of fish, designing your system, sketching a layout, the fish tank size, location, grow bed size. So it's giving you all these parameters that you can actually use when asking it to generate images later. We'll get to that in just a minute. And it talks about building your system, assembling the system, preparing the system, and it even includes this right here, which is one of the most important aspects of setting up an aquaponic system. Cycle the fish tank by establishing beneficial bacteria for several weeks before adding the fish. If you skip that step and you just throw the fish and the plants together in a brand new system that you put together, everything will die because the bacteria are not converting the fish waste into nutrients available for the plants, the plants are not going to be able to filter the water for the fish. Everything is going to die. You have to let the water and the system establish itself, like they say, for several weeks before you get going. It requires a lot of patience. That is a very common mistake beginners make, including myself when I first did it. So it pointing that out, that will save a lot of people a lot of time. This is something you might miss when you're doing the research all on your own. So please generate some images of such a system. And what it's going to do is give you a very general, rough sketch. These are not diagrams or blueprints. It is a rough sketch of this concept, just so you have an idea of what to look for. You could very easily go on an internet search engine, and here's kind of a diagram, a cross-section of such a system. The fish down here, and the water from the fish cycles through the plants, the growing medium where the bacteria is transforming the fish waste into plant nutrients and then filtering back down to the fish. And you can download full-size, very somewhat large images, much larger than what they're providing you here. And then what you can do is you can refine these. Can you please generate these, generate images of these types of systems, but outdoors inside a modern wooden shed? Okay, they're giving you actually different styles of sheds too. One with a flat roof. This one has an angled roof. Here's one. It's kind of a combination of inside and outside. And what they're doing is giving you a conceptual sketch that you can look at and pick which one you like, and you can continue refining it. Now, I'm going to show you some images on the screen from, I'm not going to make you sit and watch me refine the design using this process, but I was able to get these images, which are almost exactly what I was imagining in my mind, what I wanted to build. And I'm actually probably going to build this. I'm going to document it and do a video about it later this year. What is this actually doing? It's doing a lot like what we've seen in science fiction. People might remember Star Trek, The Next Generation. They had a room on their ship called the holodeck. You go in the holodeck and you talk to the computer, and it will create whatever you ask it to create. And you can create variations. You can modify it by talking with the computer.
Reduce the height of the table by 25%.
Computer, decrease the table's surface area by 20% and incline the top 15 degrees.
It's basically what Google's Gemini is doing with these images. It's also through the text response, almost like you're talking to the computer in Star Trek. It's generating images. ChatGPT can actually, and also Google Gemini, they can generate different types of code for programming. ChatGPT actually can generate very basic code for a 3D design program called Blender. You can ask it to generate code to make a sphere, for example, and then it will create this code that if you copy it and paste it into Blender, it'll create a three-dimensional sphere on the screen. You could see the potential of this technology to where eventually in the future it might be like Star Trek, where you explain to a computer what it wants. It shows you a conceptual sketch that you refine to be exactly what you want, and then maybe in the future it'll be connected to personal manufacturing technology like 3D printing, and it'll actually be able to physically create the object as well. That is tremendous. That is a tremendously useful technology that we see taking shape in these AI chatbots, these generative AI services. Just like any other tool created by human beings throughout history, it is only as good as the hands that it's in. Think about one of the most basic and probably first tools humans ever used, a rock. You could use the rock to help you build something. You could use it to protect yourself. You could also use it to hurt other people. You could use it to destroy. It's all up to whoever is holding the rock. If you have a rock and someone else does not, you're at an advantage, they're at a disadvantage. There's an imbalance of power. If everyone has a rock and they know how to use it, there's a balance of power, and you might think twice before hitting someone over the head with a rock, because maybe they'll hit you back. And considering technology, especially modern technology, extremely powerful technology, say nuclear weapons, when the United States was the only nation that had nuclear weapons, what did they do with it? They dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. Twice after Japan was already defeated in World War II, the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. The US considered dropping the atomic bomb during the Korean War, even the Vietnam War, but they didn't. And the reason why was because the Soviet Union, and then eventually the Chinese, and then after that, many others began acquiring the nuclear bomb. A balance of power regarding this technology was established, and it deterred people from abusing it. Of course, nuclear technology can be used to produce power, and if you want to see nuclear technology being applied, it's being applied constructively in the production of energy. Nuclear weapons exist, but there is a sense of deterrence against using them, abusing nuclear technology in that way. In a similar way, we have to think about artificial intelligence. We cannot uninvent it. We're not going to make it go away. We cannot wish it away. We cannot stop research and development into artificial intelligence. It is here. It is going to continue advancing. The question we have to ask ourselves, are we going to allow a small handful of people to monopolize it and then abuse it like nuclear weapons when they were first developed? Or are we going to ensure that artificial intelligence is in as many hands as possible to deter any one single group from abusing it, giving them an advantage over someone else and tempting them to use it, abuse it? Now, again, at the moment of recording this, ChatGPT by OpenAI and Google's Gemini, these are tremendously useful tools. Someday in the future, the developers may decide to transform it into some sort of abusive tool of propaganda to manipulate people and to validate propaganda produced by the people behind this tool. But for the time being, it's not. And just like social media, for example, it is tremendously powerful. It allows people like me to reach huge audiences that, say, 50 years ago, I would never have been able to reach. But different social media platforms become abusive. They begin censoring. They begin manipulating what people see, what information they have access to. And what do people do? What do people do? They are using critical thinking. They see that the platform is being manipulated. They move on to another one, an alternative. These days, there is a growing number of people who are literate in terms of using the internet, in terms of using social media, and people who see how empowering it is, how unacceptable it is for these platforms to be manipulated and controlled. If we could create the same level of literacy and awareness among people regarding artificial intelligence chatbots like Google Gemini, ChatGPT, and other alternatives out there, we can encourage people to use these tools constructively. And if the creators of these tools flip them and turn them into tools of propaganda, then people can collectively identify that, raise awareness regarding that, and move to a different set of tools. I will continue covering this topic. Depending on the feedback I get from this video, I'll see what direction to go in next. In the meantime, if you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Check the video description below for other places you can find and follow my work. In the video description below are links to everything I mentioned in this video, as well as for ways you can help support my work. I do not monetize my YouTube channel or any of the social media platforms that I'm on. If you do want to support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee and also Patreon. To everyone who has been helping out, whether it's a one-time donation, donations month to month, or even if you're just sharing my work with others, helping get the word out there, that is all greatly appreciated. That is what makes this work possible. So thank you, and as always, thank you for watching.